Well, hello again, folks. This is Jeff Adler, continuing my video series here, um, following up my book, Why I'm Right. Um, Again, those books are no longer available from the publisher, which doesn't exist anymore, but I still have quite a few, so if anyone wants any, let me know. You can go through YouTube or my website on YouTube or on Facebook, the Why I'm Right site, and request one. Today I wanted to talk about something that has not much to do really with current events, but it's a ongoing pet peeve of mine, an ongoing issue that we as Americans face every day. And I haven't spoken a lot about foreign affairs, but I want to do that today. Specifically the war on terror. And the reason this is a pet peeve is because liberals and Democrats don't really believe there is a war on terror, or should be. And perhaps worse than that, they try to pretend that things are a lot better out there than they really are in terms of terrorism and in terms of their complicit nature with regard to terrorism and their mistakes and the rest of it that they've been involved in over the years. Now, there have been mistakes made on both sides of the aisle. There have been issues with all sorts of politics getting in the way, but stripped clean of its politics, and of course seen from a factual and historical point of view, we peel off some of the layers of the onion and we start to see a pattern where liberals and Democrats are loath to engage in this war wholeheartedly. Now, they have a history of this going back to the Vietnam era, when the original people in charge of Vietnam, its subsequent political and diplomatic issues in its infancy, and later its actual boots on the ground combat issues, all started and stemmed from Democrats who didn't understand war, didn't understand how to prosecute a war, didn't understand what a military was for, and they got themselves into a quagmire rather quickly. Didn't know how to pull themselves out. In fact, it got so bad that LBJ had to go. Part of the reason he lost convincingly, somewhat, in 1968 to a guy at all intents and purposes, Richard Nixon, had no reason to win a presidential election, considering his recent history with the public and with the press. Nonetheless, got the silent majority all revved up to vote for him, became the president, had to inherit the quagmire. And rather than getting us out of the quagmire, he put us further into the quagmire, and the liberals decided to forget what Kennedy and Johnson had done to get them there and try to put the whole thing on Nixon. History has cleaned that mess up, that lie, but over time. But nonetheless, we're still dealing with Vietnam syndrome, or at least the Democrats are. Now they're afraid to do anything with the military. And they even put a man in charge, Bill Clinton, in 1992, who admitted that he hated the military in a letter to his congressman, where he tried to ditch and dodge the draft, which he did successfully, and in which he mentioned that he loathed the military. And then we made him president, commander-in-chief. Yay us. That's the one I want. The first person to have never served in any capacity whatsoever in the armed forces of the United States to become the commander in chief. And it's not that he just didn't end up in the military, it's that he loathed it. Well, you get what you pay for, or you get what you elect. We get the presidents and the government that we deserve because we're the ones that put them there. Vietnam syndrome was a thing that tied the hands of many liberals when it came to doing the right thing. America was born out of a war. We took our first military actions as a country against terrorists. This is our bread and butter. Fighting terrorism is what America is all about. And from day one. 1804, whatever it was, when Jefferson sent the very first American ships to the Mediterranean to fight terrorists. The Barbary pirates. We've been a nation with a military might, a military presence, a military identity, and we are a country that wins wars. We never lost a war or any military engagement until Vietnam. Some say Korea was a tie. That's not a loss. But we lost Vietnam. We lost Vietnam because it was the hands of people who didn't care enough, didn't know enough, and didn't understand enough about our role in the world and what a military is meant to do and how you use one. Now, if you had the right mindset, Vietnam would have ended quick and virtually painless. But we didn't. We went in half-assed, pussyfooting. We went in dribs and drabs, drips. We tried to do as little and get away with as much as possible. We tried nothing till it was too late that did any damage at all, that made any difference at all. And so we ended up in a war that lasted over 11, 12 years and got nothing for it except North Vietnam. Communism in Laos and in Cambodia. Pol Pot. Killing fields. Now, that's not all our fault, of course. The communists had something to do with that, of course. Let's blame the shooter, not the gun. But the point is that we messed it up. And we messed it up because the people in charge didn't really want to be there. Now, and once they were there, didn't know what to do. We could have avoided the Vietnam syndrome quite easily if we had just gone in, kicked ass, and taken names. Shock and awe when we had the chance. Before they got wise to our ways, before they figured out means and methods that could screw us up, before they got bolder, we could have decimated. But we didn't go in to decimate. We tried to half-ass our way through it. And what's more is we didn't listen to the people on the ground at the time who were telling us what we needed, what they required to do the job. Instead, the presidents, Kennedy and later mostly Johnson, only wanted to listen to the generals in Washington, D.C., at the Pentagon, and what they thought we should do. And they overrid the suggestions and desires and wishes of the generals and colonels and others in country. We've since learned that mistake again and again, but we've learned it was a mistake in subsequent conflicts. But nonetheless, Vietnam War was fought that way, and it was an utter disaster. So, let's move forward, shall we? While we were fighting the Vietnam War, there was something happening in the Middle East in the 1960s. Lots of change occurred in the 1960s, and it didn't all just happen here. From the end of World War I and end of World War II, when the Middle East became stabilized for a number of reasons, many countries, after each of those wars, were set into its future motion by the superpowers, United States, Britain mostly, and some others, France, and stabilized those regions and made them somewhat benign, peaceful, for a while anyway. King Faisal, for instance, was set up in what became Iraq, and peace reigned. The Shah of Iran and his family reigned in Persia for decades, and although they had their problems, as all these countries still had, there was prosperity, there was wealth. They became a cosmopolitan nation that wanted to be part of Europe more than it wanted to be part of the Middle East. Israel became a state and a purveyor of peace, and many of the other countries around that area just kind of laid low for a while. Lots of things happened in the 60s that changed all that. The Palestinians found a guy named Arafat to try to disrupt the sovereignty of Israel, started a group called the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, whatever they're called, and subsequently led to the Six-Day War in 1967. And later, 6 years later, the Egyptians got involved and tried to start another war with their help from Lebanon and Syria and some others, the Yom Kippur War. Both ended in their defeats, and Israel growing its borders back to its origin, only for them to give it back in a gesture, olive branch of peace. Not smart, but they did it, proving who were the good guys and who were the bad guys, forever. Until, of course, the liberals and the anti-Semites, who many of whom are the same people, decided that that wasn't good enough. But another thing happened in the 1960s in Iraq. The Faisal family had run Iraq since the end of World War I. Then there was this upstart who performed a military coup and overthrew the Faisals, King Faisal, not the Faisal, I don't think his last name, that was his first name, I don't know, King Faisal, in the mid-60s. His name was Saddam Hussein. A very young, charismatic, militant nut job who took over the country. We were too busy with our own problems in Asia to worry about such things. And at first it didn't seem like Saddam Hussein was much of an issue. Besides the fact that there was no direct national interest like there was in Vietnam, where the spread of communism was a problem for everybody, not just America, and not just Vietnam. Hussein kept to himself, built up his military, the Republican Guard, and laid low. And then in the 1980s, he had sufficiently built up his military and worked some other deals to make enough money to buy weapons and work deals, probably partly with the United States, among other countries, where he could go after his great enemy. Now remember, the Iran was run by the Shah. And the Shah was not a theocratic guy. He was not running Iran theocratically, but democratically, or as a monarchy, I guess would be a better way to say it. He was a king. But when the Ayatollahs overthrew the Shah and exiled him and made that country a theocracy, their version of Islam and their way of preaching it became a direct threat to the somewhat more secular version being discussed in Iraq. And all of a sudden, there was a conflict between the two. Our version and your version and whatever. I don't know all the details of what started the Iran-Iraq war, but it started, and it lasted years, and it was bloody, and they fought to a draw when it seemed like Iran was going to win. America threw some money and weapons in Saddam Hussein's way, helped him even the tables a bit, because, after all, Iran was our enemy, not Iraq. Following the beginning of the modern-day war on terror, which occurred in 1979 when the Shah was deposed. And Iran thought it would be a good idea to show the world how badass they were by taking American hostages. Anyone who lived through the Iran hostage ordeal for 444 days knows what a boondoggle that was, and knows how feckless Jimmy Carter's presidency with regard to that was, and how painful it was to watch and deal with. But it was a sign of things to come. The war on terror is a war that describes not just our country, but the Western world, Western civilization's war against the spread of jihad and the spread of fundamentalist, extremist Islamic practice, which goes back thousands of years to the time of Muhammad. When Muhammad, who was not a warmonger when he started out, didn't get his way, he decided to become ruthless. At first, he was benign, but when this petulant little shit didn't get what he wanted, he turned and changed and decided he was going to just decimate anybody who disagreed with him. And he got away with it and became powerful, claimed himself to be a prophet, and started a whole new wave, if you will, a whole new movement within the religion of Islam. Prior to Muhammad, people who called themselves Muslims were mostly peace-loving, like Christians, Jews, and others, for the most part. They warred, sure, everyone did. amongst themselves, amongst others, what have you. But there was no doctrine that told them that they needed to do this. We'll get into what happened on the next part 2. All right? We'll see you then.